welcome back. Into Cherry Picking. Today's video, we're going to be looking at must-drop players as we head into the fantasy hockey playoffs. But first, a couple things I want to touch on before that. Skippers is officially back. If you're not tuning into fantasy baseball right now, if you're not getting ready for the season, you're way behind already. We've got must-draft, must-players, players to avoid. Abe's all over that shit right now, so be sure you're tuning in to Skippers. Those videos are going to be dropping a lot more frequently coming soon. And then another thing, too, as we get closer to the fantasy hockey playoffs, there's one tool I've been using that's been helping me a lot, whether it be in the NHL player prop betting game or fantasy hockey, and that's PROPS.CASH. It's a great tool for all player props, not only hockey, NBA, college basketball too now. So many in-depth metrics and stats that they have that are displayed in a really easy way to consume. If this does interest you, sign up with the code OwnersBox. You can get 25% off your first month. So a nice amount of savings there for that first month. And I can almost guarantee if you're into stats or anything like that, this data will be for you and you'll love to use it every single day. All right, so players to drop right now. The first one we're going to be looking at is McCann on the Seattle Kraken. He's around 30 to 35% rostered in Yahoo leagues and ESPN leagues right now. Just very underwhelming recently, along with the rest of the Seattle team. His last 10 games, he's 4 goals, 4 assists, and 8 points. However, that's off a really high shooting percentage, about 16-17%, and a lot of those points are coming on the power play as well. So typically a much higher shooting percentage than we've seen with McCann in the past, and his expected goals is only 2 over that span, which is 6 on his team too. So he's starting to fall down kind of the leaderboard here as top forwards on this Kraken team as the playoffs kind of come closer. And looking at his 5-on-5 stats over the last 10 days too, he has just 5 points. He has 13 shots on goal, which is 8th on his team, 12 scoring chances created on his own, which is 7th, and then just 4 high danger chances, which is tied 8th with some forwards that are a little further down on the depth chart. So considering we're seeing his whole team regress here, I don't think it really bodes well for McCann, considering his position on the team right now. Both of his line mates, Jordan Eberle and Matty Beniers, are outproducing him. So you're looking at the third option on, even if it is the first line on Seattle, they're not a team that's going to be scoring a ton of goals night in and night out. So at 30 to 35% rostered right now, it just doesn't really make a ton of sense to keep this guy on your team. I dropped the must-add video earlier this week, and one guy I'd pick up instead of McCann is Seth Jarvis. He's playing much better right now. His volume is a lot higher than McCann, and Carolina is just a way better hockey team. So McCann is definitely the first guy you can look at dropping right now. All right, the next guy we're going to be looking at, a defenseman, and that's Schenn. He's 50% rostered right now, 52% rostered in Yahoo leagues, which is crazy. I know he just got traded, so people are maybe a little bit slow to react here, but I definitely think he's someone you can look at dropping. The first thing you want to look at here, you don't see the type of production from D-men on this Toronto Maple Leafs team as you do on other teams. They just don't score a lot of goals. The Leafs this season have the 6th fewest goals scored by defensemen this season. So Schenn getting traded to Toronto, it doesn't really bode well for his fantasy value. Now, is Schenn going to be a guy scoring a ton of goals? Absolutely fucking not. But he has 3 goals so far this season. All he does is really throw the body around, which will probably continue. But is this something, because it's definitely something the Leafs are looking for, but in terms of his fantasy value as a whole, it's definitely, we're going to see some regression. Schenn does lead the NHL in hits this season, which is, I was honestly very surprised to see that stat. I didn't realize he was as big of a body or throws his body around as much as he does, or as he did on this Vancouver team. But how can he possibly have a similar role to where he was on Vancouver, or an elevated role for that matter, in Toronto, where one, they're bringing in a lot of new faces to bolster up this blue line as the playoffs come near. And we don't really know how this lineup's going to shake up, but I don't believe Schenn's going to be playing as many minutes as he did with Vancouver. Secondly, they're not the Vancouver Canucks. This team is much deeper as a whole. He probably won't be playing on any of the power play. He got some looks on the power play on Vancouver. And then if you're looking as a penalty kill unit as well, he'll probably find himself on maybe the second penalty kill. So just his volume is definitely we're seeing it come down here as he does come onto this Toronto team. And it's crunch time right now in the fantasy hockey playoffs. He's not playing right away on this Toronto roster either. So you got to find other players to fill in as he just sits out for a couple of games here as they try to find where he's going to fit in this Toronto roster. So at 52% rostered, it's ridiculous that Schenn is still highly rostered. So look for some other guys on the waiver wire. Mikey Matheson is definitely a good example of a guy who you can have this week who will definitely exceed the value of Schenn. All right, so the other defenseman we're going to be looking at dropping this week is Brady Skjei on the Carolina Hurricanes. This is a tough one for me because he was a must-add about a month and a half ago, but his production and role on this team over the last 2 weeks has just completely taken a 180. One of the big reasons why I say that is he's not on the first power play anymore. We've seen Brent Burns move back into that role on the point. And now Brady Skjei back on that second power play unit. And, it's not a horrible thing, but he won't be seeing as many minutes and 5-on-4 on 5-on-3, that's for sure. Even playing on the second unit, that still has a decent amount of skill. Over the last 10 games too, he has no points in 5-on-5 play. That's really concerning for a guy that was producing at a very high rate only 2 to 3 weeks ago. And over that same span, his expected goals for is just below 1. I think it's at 0.88, which is really low, again, for a guy that we've seen was much higher about a month ago. And sure, he does play a lot. Like his offense production is, or his offensive time is there, but his production has just been low. He's 13th on the team in scoring chances for his last 10 games in all strengths. That's like right next to Jalen Chatfield, who's another defenseman on Carolina, who's really bursting on the scene this year, but definitely doesn't have as big of a role as Brady Skjei. So that's also something a little concerning. And then he's also third in giveaways on the team over his last 10 games. So Rob Brindamore might not trust him as much as the playoffs come near. You know, they might look at just some other guys on this roster, even up the time on the ice, because Brady Skjei is still playing a lot of minutes, close to what Brent Burns is playing. But just with everything that's going on this Carolina team right now, you know, Shane Gostisbehere is coming onto this roster as well. Skjei's role is just going to continue, you know, to regress as the playoffs come closer. So I think there are definitely some better options, some guys that are being utilized a little bit more on their teams that are on the waiver wire right now. So Brady Skjei is definitely a drop. All right, the last guy we're dropping now, David Perron on the Detroit Red Wings. This is an easy one for me, and honestly, right before I recorded this video, Tyler Bertuzzi got traded to Boston. So this team's just becoming more and more depleted, and you might think, oh, there's an opportunity there for David Perron, but still, as a whole, I don't really trust this Detroit Red Wings team, especially in the fantasy hockey playoffs. You know, you want to get your best roster out there. So looking at Detroit, they have the hardest remaining schedule out of any team. Truly, the only players I'll be consistently starting, I think, on Detroit would be Larkin, Mo Seider, and Fabry, maybe, and then obviously Ville Husso. He has been a great goaltender for a lot of fantasy hockey owners this season. Lucas Raymond's also back, and even with Raymond out of the lineup, Perron was only playing like 15 minutes per game over the last 2-3 weeks, which is just 9th most on the team. So that's really low volume there. So he might be good when he's on the ice, but the question is, does he have enough volume to keep a roster spot? Is he on the ice enough? Is he involved in enough scoring chances when he's on the play? Is he doing stuff elsewhere? And I personally don't think there are. I think there are much more valuable pieces elsewhere, especially considering this guy's 50% rostered in Yahoo leagues right now. He has just 2 points in 5-on-5 hockey in his last 10 games. That's not worth someone keeping a roster spot for at all. Detroit has also been overperforming as of late. There's a reason why they are sellers at the deadline. I just don't believe that they can compete in this Eastern Conference, in the Metro Conference. Over the last month and a half, too, the Red Wings have been working off a shooting percentage of like 12%. That's way too high for a team like this. I think this team will continue to lose skill as we've seen them moving a lot of pieces here, and that will just hurt their offense as they come into a really tough part of their schedule. So look for guys that have plus matchups that you can stream instead of a guy like David Perron. I really think that Perron will struggle as this season comes to an end. All right, thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know what you thought of the players to drop this week. If there are any other players that are on your roster right now that you're thinking of dropping, feel free to ask those questions in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.